So, God, do you recognize legal marriages? Are they marriages from your perspective? Yes and no. They can be, but they might not be. So, what is a marriage from your perspective? Two people surrendering spirit, soul, and body to one another. Okay, how do you do that? I get the body, and some people would say, well, when you surrender your body to one another, you are married, because they take the scripture, whoever's joined to the Lord is one spirit with him. In relation to whoever's joined to a prostitute is one flesh with her. Well, actually, you can become one flesh, but not one spirit or one soul. So you need all three. So there are some who would be connected spiritually, or let's say physically, and their soul, their emotions are connected, but that isn't enough for what God sees as real relationship of marriage is. It needs to be a spiritual surrender. Well, I didn't know how to do that. In fact, no one had taught me how to do it, and I've never heard of anyone teach anyone else how to do it either. I'm not saying you can't have a spiritual connection, but how do you do that? People, in marriage service, and I've used myself, the three-stranded cord from Ecclesiastes. A three-stranded cord cannot be broken, easily broken. Well, God's the strand in the middle of the two. Well, the Father said to me, no, that's not anywhere near enough for what I consider a relationship. You need 9 strands. You need your spirit, soul, and body, her spirit, soul, and body, and Father, Son, and Spirit to be in the midst of this is the rope that will not be broken. Once you have that level of connection. So I obviously asked God, do I need to be married in church before you with vows publicly made? Which he said, well, you can do that if you want to, but that's not actually, people do that all the time and they're not really married because they didn't connect spirit, soul, and body or surrendered. They just did the legal bit or the church bit, but that didn't make them married. Just no more than a piece of legal paper makes me married before God. It made me married in the eyes of the law. And of course, I couldn't get legally married until I'm divorced, So I, for me, it was like, okay, God, do I need to wait before I'm divorced to enter into this relationship that you want me to have or not? So, well, he just reiterated the fact, well, you're not married as far as I'm concerned. So, okay, then I'm free to pursue relationship. And you consider marriage to be the surrender of spirit, soul, and body. Therefore, you might consider me married if I'm willing to surrender spirit, soul, and body. So I got to that point of deconstruction. But it was quite difficult because I had strongly held views of what marriage was and Christian views and, cultural views as well. And eventually, I realized that those views may be found in a marriage that is the normal marriage that you would have in church or making vows or legally married. And some people may have surrendered their body to one another. That definitely doesn't make them married. Some people may have surrendered their soul and body together, and that doesn't make them married either. And I think a lot of people are at that point where they have surrendered soul and body, but the spirit, that dimension, is the key dimension to it, because that is what opens up the union with us and God together. And that is something which you need to know how to do. And if you don't know how to engage God in your spirit and engage first love, but God has been so gracious in that he has restored first love to me in this. I never ever knew what it was when I was a 16-year-old, raging hormones and a whole wrong view of relationship and everything else. No idea, totally emotionally immature. No idea of what it was. But now my relationship with God has been paralleled in my relationship now. So God showed me that the process that he took me through, the garden of my heart, the process of looking into my eyes, telling me how much he loved me and wanted me. The dance floor of entwining and becoming emotionally connected with one, which opens up destiny, identity, and then the soaking room of preparation that you've got to go through, and that's still taking place. Obviously, you've got to find out about each other. You've got to understand each other. You've got to come to a place of intimacy, of acceptance of each other, and also, understanding the triggers that you might still have from the past, because, behaviors are triggered sometimes, and you're like finding yourself triggered and you don't know why am I triggered, usually because of insecurities in the relationship, because you're still discovering it, so that's really, then you ultimately get to the bridal chamber of a level of intimacy. So in my, obviously, relationship with God took me through that whole journey, then separated soul and spirit, and then took me to the place of intimacy, oneness, being able to dwell in that place way beyond everything I could have imagined or thought before. It's very interesting, and obviously a lot of people would struggle with that, because of what they've been brought up to believe about what God sees marriage as. God does not see marriage as the piece of paper. God doesn't see marriage just making vows. They've got to be vows that are actually real. Sometimes people go through the motions because they want to get married. They don't actually mean it, or they don't really know what they're saying. You've got to know, and you've got to be committed in that level of surrender. And if you're not, don't go into the marriage or relationship if you're not willing to surrender at that level. If you want your own independence and you want to keep your own spirit and soul secret, don't go into it, because it was just a recipe for disaster. You've got to be willing, and I think it takes a degree of maturity to do that. And I think that's why I think a lot of young people who are rushing into marriage have got no clue about the surrender of spirit, soul, and body. They're just needing to get married because of, in the church stuff is, well, we want to get married because we want to have sex. So it's like, okay, well, we're going to get married then so we can have sex. That's not the reason to get married, to have sex. That will just fade very quickly if that's the reason you're getting married. It's got to be way, way more than that. It's a union, of everything. And you've got to be prepared for that union. And if you're not, don't do it until you are, would be my advice to people.